So unless you've been living under a rock, you've probably heard of this new game coming out called Minecraft Earth, which isn't a blatant ripoff of Pokemon Go. I don't know why anybody would even hint that. That's simply not the case. But either way, Minecraft Earth has this feature where you take your phone, you point it at something, and now you're using the camera, and it does this kind of real-time motion tracking that's very impressive, by the way, and it puts Minecraft assets over whatever it is you're filming. So you have this Minecraft integration with real-world footage that we want to emulate using just Blender. And here's a sample of what we're going to be making, just so you know what I'm even talking about. So we have this alleyway that's also a parking lot. I'm not really sure what's up with this. And I put a Minecraft crater, I guess is what I'm going to call it. Basically, you dug into the ground and you have stone, coal, and dirt. And there I am in the reflection, right there filming this. And by the way, again, I'm doing this with a phone camera, just like you would in Minecraft Earth. So as long as you have a phone and Blender, you're going to be able to make this. And really, to make this effect, we're going to split this into 3 sections, so a 3-part tutorial series, you guessed it. And those 3 parts are going to be this one. The first one is going to be creating the Minecraft assets, so basically making these blocks in the shape of a crater, so stone, dirt, coal, maybe also iron. The second tutorial is going to be about motion tracking, and that's basically getting the motion of our camera so that the crater moves with the camera motion. Pretty much like this real-time motion tracking that's happening in Minecraft Earth, which again, I have no idea how they're doing it in real time. That is very, very impressive. We're going to do it the old-fashioned way, but very similar idea, at least in theory. And then the third part of this tutorial is going to be taking our moving camera, our crater, and combining everything together with some compositing and with some projections, and that is the tie everything together step. So 1, 2, 3 steps. Keep it as easy as possible. And I'm also going to try to make this tutorial as accessible to beginners, beginners at Blender, but it's more so an intermediate, but if you're a beginner and you follow along, you will be rewarded. So all you need for this is a phone, like I said, Blender, obviously, and textures. Since we're making a stone block, a dirt block, and whatever else, we need textures from the game. If you actually own Minecraft, you can get the vanilla resource pack for free. I'm going to see if I can find something to put in the description for a download. It will be there, but maybe I won't find anything. We'll see. And from this vanilla texture pack, I basically extracted the 4 textures that I plan to use: stone, coal, iron, and dirt. And if we open one of these up, you see that it's very, very tiny. You might not even be able to see it if you're watching this on a phone on YouTube. But we have this tiny little texture because it's directly from the game. It's a 16 by 16 pixel texture, which is pretty much all the textures in Minecraft. That's how it keeps the file sizes so low. But this is actually going to pose a bit of an issue when we import this into Blender, and we're going to talk about what that issue is and how to fix it. So enough introduction. Let's get into what you clicked on. You want to learn how to do this, so we'll open up Blender. And we're using Release Candidate 2, but by the time you're watching this, Blender 2.8 might already be out. Or if you're watching this in the distant future, 2.9, whatever. So the first thing we need to do in this tutorial, we're making the crater. So the first thing we need to do is model one of the blocks. So let's say a stone block, for example. And we modeled it. It's done. The cube's already there. So modeling, as you guessed, is going to be very, very easy for this. So all we really need to do is add the textures, which is the shading step. And for now, I'm just going to get rid of this light, X for delete, and also this camera. We're going to need them later, but for now I want to keep this clutter-free, so we just have this cube, which we could rename to stone, but there's going to be a lot of blocks pretty soon, so I'm just going to keep it as is and move over to the shading workspace. And this is where we're going to add in our textures. So this cube has a default material applied to it. It's called material. I know it's creative, so we can just take that and rename it to stone, since we're going to turn this into a stone block. And right now, our material has a principled BSDF node going into our material output, which is what we're seeing. And this works, however, I want to simplify it a bit, so we're just going to take this and delete it with X. And instead, we're going to add in, just click Add over here, or Shift A is the hotkey to do that. We're going to add in a diffuse BSDF. So instead of principled, we're using diffuse BSDF, hook that up. And by the way, just a little tip, if you had this principled BSDF, I'm pretty sure you can click this, Shift S, and then this is a replace. So whatever node you choose here, like shader, diffuse, it's just going to replace it. So instead of deleting and adding, you replace. You don't have to do it, it's just a tip. So this diffuse BSDF is a lot more lightweight in some sense than the principled BSDF, since we don't need metallic, roughness, specular. Pretty much we just have a color here and we want it to react to lighting. So just diffuse BSDF, and right now the color is determined by this color wheel. Of course that's fine, but we want it to be determined by a texture instead of just a solid color. So Shift A, and then we'll load in a image texture node. Hook this up to the color, so whatever texture we put in here will be the color for the diffuse BSDF, which will be what we're seeing in the material. And let's open up a texture in the desktop and open up our stone, which came from the vanilla resource pack, texture pack. I think it's called either or. And when we do this, we're living in the present tense. You see that we get this very smudgy, cloudy looking thing, and that's probably not what you expected. You expected to see the texture. And you're actually seeing it right now, but it's the issue I talked about before, or I hinted at it, where this is only a 16 by 16 pixel texture. And Blender doesn't like that very much. It likes high-res textures, at least, 256 by 256. This is far too low res, and what it's doing here is it's taking the pixels and interpolating in between it. So it's filling in data that isn't there. And normally that's a good thing, but when you only have 16 by 16 pixels, that is, what is that? That's 256 pixels altogether. When it's interpolating that few pixels, you're going to get a very smudgy looking thing. So what we want to do is take this interpolation, and we want to fix it by disabling it. So right now, our interpolation is set to linear, so texture interpolation is linear, and the setting we want for this is closest. And if you hover over this, it's going to say no interpolation. So that's essentially what closest means. And you see we get this kind of pixelated looking thing, which is closer. It's not exactly what we want, but now it's not blurry anymore. So that is one step closer to the goal. Okay, so now the next thing we need to do is make sure that there are all the pixels that should be there. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm basically saying that this kind of looks like a zoomed in version of the texture. There should be much more detail on each side of this cube. So to do this, I'm going to first make sure you guys have Node Wrangler enabled. So Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and make sure that Node Wrangler, you can just look it up right there. Make sure that this is enabled if it isn't already by default. I think it might be, but maybe it isn't. And the reason we want Node Wrangler, which comes with Blender, but the reason we want it enabled is we can select a node, like the texture node, and hit Control-T, which gives us some extra nodes that we wanted, and this is just a faster way to do it. So Node Wrangler is a very good thing. And we get this mapping node, this texture coordinates node, and basically what this is saying, again, I want this to be beginner friendly, so we're not going to get into the nitty gritty, as it were. Texture coordinates is basically saying how do I want to apply this texture to our object, in this case the cube, and then mapping is going to let us transform those coordinates. So for example, if we took the scale and brought this up, you see it's kind of doing what we want. We're getting more detail here, and if we pick the right scale, it might actually work, but this is just kind of like a put tape over it solution, duct tape solution. It's not very good, it's not very precise. There's supposed to be a certain number of pixels, 16 by 16, for each face of this, and right now we're just trying to see what looks right, which isn't what we want. So let's set these back to 1. And what we need to change instead of this mapping is we need to change the UV coordinates. You see we're using UV coordinates, we need to change those instead. So right now, if we select our cube and go into edit mode, and for this window, let's say, make that a bit bigger, we're going to change this over to a UV editor so we can see our UVs. Right now, we have kind of the standard T pose unwrap. Let me make this bigger for you. That's Control Spacebar on any window to maximize it. So here we have this T-pose kind of unwrap. So if you were to take this cube and flatten it, you're just cutting paper, this is what you'd expect. But this isn't what we want, since you see we have this whole texture, and each face here, each face of the cube should be taking up that whole image, since it looks the same on each side of the cube. And that is what we want to simulate here. So right now, what we can do is you see if we take all our faces, that's A to select everything, A for all, and then G for grab, for moving. You see that our UV coordinates are actually affecting what this looks like over here. since it's using our UV coordinates, but we want each of these to be taking up the full thing like we said. So I'm just going to enable syncing right here, and this lets us do the following. If we select a face here, it will select it here, and vice versa. So that's why it's called syncing, very useful. So what we want to do, select all of these, move them over to the side, and let's see, are these connected or disconnected? Okay, these right now are disconnected, so what we could do is put one in the middle, scale it up so it's taking up the whole thing, repeat over and over and over, but we're not going to get it exactly right, and this is very time consuming. So there's actually an operation for this. I'll maximize this. We can select one at a time, so this face for example, and then we can hit, well, if we can't find it, we'll just look it up, so F3, or for you, it might be spacebar depending on your mapping. So again, F3 for the search menu, and it's called Pack Islands, so it's right there. So you hit Pack Islands and it will automatically find the best packing into our UV space, and since it's a square, it's going to fill up the entire space. So if we select this one, F3, Pack Islands, and it's basically overlapping here, and we just want to do this a couple of times, and this is much more accurate than centering it and scaling it, at least in my opinion. And by the way, if you wanted to do this without the searching, is it N? Yes, N gives you a bunch of options here, N and T, and you can look it up. I don't actually know where it is, which is why I searched it, but if you know and you're yelling at me, oh, it's right there, you don't even know this interface. Well, I do know this interface, but I like searching, okay? That's just what I like doing. But now you see that the stone, it may look kind of weird in a Blender setting, but if you were to load this into Minecraft, this is the correct amount of pixels. Now the next issue is that, for you avid Minecraft players, this is facing the wrong direction. The grain is going upwards instead of across for these going around here. And I think it's wrong for all these actually. So what we can do, hit N and T to hide these. We can select all our UV squares, so A, and then rotate them with R by 90 degrees. And let's make sure that that does exactly what we want here. So all of these going around the center are going horizontally, that's where the grain's going, and then this top's going this way. I don't know which way it's supposed to actually go in Minecraft, but I think that might be right. You can always fix this. So for example, if you want to fix this one, you just select it and then rotate it. Not a big deal. But now we actually have, I went back into object mode, now we actually have our stone block with our shader. And remember, we're not just slapping on a texture into here, we're processing it through the BSDF, which means if we go into rendered view and add back in a light, that's Shift A to add a light, it's going to actually, it's very weak right now, but you can see it's actually reacting to the lighting. It wouldn't do this if we just put a texture without the BSDF. So let's get rid of that. Okay, so now we have a single cube, which is pretty good. I guess we should save all our hard work. Control S for save, desktop, we'll call this Minecraft tutorial. I'm just about as creative as the creators of Minecraft Earth who totally didn't rip off Pokemon Go. Again, I haven't played it, I think it's actually substantially different, but I like ragging on them. So what we want to do is take this block, again, if you want to preview what's going on here, so actually see the shading, you can either go into rendered view or into look dev mode, which will give us a lighter version because it's not accounting for lighting here. So this is what I recommend. We want to take this and turn it into a crater. So I want this face, the top part of the stone, to be floor level because it's going to be under the floor since it's a crater. So we're going to move it G, Z, so it's going along the Z axis, and then -1. Yes, that did it. So now, since this is 2, has a thickness or a height of 2, so moving at -1, we'll move it from the centered position, -1, to the floor position, at least what we talked about. We want to take this and turn it into a crater, which means we need to do a lot of duplication, and then moving things down, and then turning some of them into dirt or coal or whatever we want, really. So we can either duplicate with Shift D and, keep positioning them over and over, but since these are blocks, they tessellate very nicely, so we want to take advantage of that. We can automate a lot of this is what I'm saying. So in the modifiers, we're going to add a array, which you can see already made a copy, and this is basically going directly next to the cube since our relative offset is 1, which is 100% if you want to think of it that way. If we increase it, there will be a bit of spacing. But we want to bring up the count to, I don't remember really the perspective of the footage, but maybe 4 or 5, maybe 6 or 7. I'll go with 7. So this is 7 across. And right now, if we want to add some, make it a grid, not just a line, you might think, oh, just increase this, but it's just going to make a diagonal. So what we want to do is have this one and then use that as our base for another array modifier. So one array modifier gives us these copies, and then if we add in another array, and this time it just made it longer, but that's because our second array modifier down here, let's close up the first one. Our second one is still going along the x-axis, so we can set that to 0. So right now it's perfectly overlapping, and we want it to go along this green y-axis. There we go. So now we have a count of 2. So let's have our grid be, well, let's see. What looks right? I had it as a pretty long crater. We can always review the footage. Okay, so maybe like 10, something like that. I don't know. Hopefully it fits into our footage. We can always modify it later. 10. Now I'll go with 12. So we have this nice long rectangle, and we can just apply this, and then also apply this one. So now we have one big object. You might think that, oh, we made a grid of cubes, which is what we want, but no. In this outliner, we only have one cube. It's one cube object. So we want to separate it, and it's actually pretty easy to do so, since when we go into edit mode, it's kind of hard to see from here, but if we select L, so let me explain what that means. If I select this, so one face from this cube, and then I hit L, which means linked, it's going to select all the faces that are linked to that object. So if it's connected to it, it will select it. And you see that these are kind of separate, even though they're part of the same object. So what we can do is back in object mode, is with the selected F3 for our search bar, and then we'll type in, I think, separate. Yeah, separate. And then we want to separate by loose parts, since these are a bunch of cubes that are part of the same object, but they're kind of disconnected. So by loose parts. There we go. And you can see we have a bunch of cubes over here. That's why I didn't want to go through the naming convention, so we wouldn't have stone 1, stone 2, stone 3, etc. But these are now separate objects, which is pretty good. Now, this is something we don't really need to take care of, but we could. You're going to notice that when we select this one, we have a dot over here, which is the origin, which is not what we would expect. We want the origin to be in the center of this cube. This one should be centered since this is our original, but everything else will not be centered. So I believe a fast way to do this is A, to select everything, and then Object, Set Origin, and then we want to bring our origin to the geometry. There you go. So now we have this grid of origins where they're supposed to be. It's not a big deal for what we're doing here, but it is correct in some sense. Okay, so we have this grid, and we want to turn it into a crater. First, I'm going to turn it into a crater of only stone blocks, and then we'll transform some of them into dirt or whatever, which will be a very easy modification. So in the top view, I'm just going to select some of these. And I guess the fastest way to do this is a box selection, so B, and then drag. Okay, that did almost what I wanted. We want to deselect pretty much the perimeter of this, so B, and then hold Shift, I believe. Yeah, there we go. B, hold Shift, and then B, hold Shift, so we only have the inner part. And right now we can take this and bring it down, but that's a very kind of too nice looking crater. It doesn't look very organic, which, if that's what you want to go for, whatever. But I don't want that organic, or I do want that organic stuff. I almost said the wrong thing. So let's deselect some of these, holding Shift. And you just want to pick whatever kind of looks natural and kind of random, but also has a bit of order to it. Whatever is aesthetically pleasing to you. Who am I to judge? We can have some protruding blocks over here. Maybe we'll add this one back in and cut this one out. Cut this one out. Okay, so that is looking pretty organic, pretty random. So we can take this selection, G for grab, Z, and then -2. Yeah, -2. Since we want it to go one block length down. So now this is on a lower level. And then we can do the same type of thing. So deselect some of these, and these are the ones that are going to go even a level deeper. So again, we want to deselect most of the perimeter. Doesn't have to be all of it, especially if we want it to look fairly random. We don't want to be too systematic about this. We can always go back into 3D view to see what this is going to look like. So let's say we want to keep that, deselect some of these. Okay, that's looking pretty random. So G, Z, -2. And I should mention Blender does have a feature for random selection. I don't know if I remember it. Let's see, F3 random. Yeah, select random. That works, but I do want it to still be connected. Even though it's random, it's one connected island that we're moving downwards, which is why I'm not using that feature. Okay, so that made a lower level, but of course we have accidentally created some gaps here. And to fix those, we can just select any cube that is hovering above a gap. So this one, I'm just shift clicking here. Anything that has a gap, just want to view it. This one, and then these two, and this one, and you want to shift D for duplicate, and then Z -2. And that should fill in all the holes, but we can check the exterior, see if we can see any holes. Okay, that looks pretty good, and let's go 1 or 2 levels deeper. So just select whatever you want to go 1 level deeper. It's pretty much the same procedure over and over again. But once you get good at this, you can really, you could technically program and automate this, or just import models directly from Minecraft. There's ways to do that. But it's good to understand the approach of how you do it in Blender the normal way. It teaches you a lot about Blender and about yourself too. It's important. Okay, so I don't know what I'm even talking about anymore, so let's just move on with it. We have our selection GZ -2. And again, we should have some holes, like this one is hovering above a hole. This one is. These two are. Seems like almost all of them are. Okay, Shift D, Z -2. And we'll see if there's any holes from the exterior that we can find. Okay, this is looking pretty good. Okay, I like this. And we can have one rare pocket of 2 of these that go 1 level deeper. -2. And then fill in the holes. You know what I'm talking about. Shift D, Z -2. Okay, so let's just do one more check to make sure we didn't make a mistake. Otherwise, we're going to regret not taking care of this earlier. Okay, I'm happy with that. Let's do a save. And now what we want to do is take this and add a bit of variation. So right now it looks good geometrically, but in terms of its content, it's all stone. So let's select one cube that we would like to be dirt, for example. So maybe we can have a patch over here that's dirt. So with one cube selected, we'll go to shading. And you see this has the stone material. No surprise. It looks like stone. So what we want to do is, instead of creating a entirely new material from scratch, we want to take I don't know if instance is the right word. We want to copy this, but make it unlinked from this material. And you can do that by hitting this button right here. And you see now it changed the name of this, and we can change it to dirt. So this has the dirt material, and all these are just going to have stone. So with this one, all we need to do, since we set up our UV coordinates and it's using the right texture coordinates and all this, all we have to do is change the texture from stone to, you guessed it, dirt. We need to change it to dirt. This fly, man. Okay. Folder, desktop, and then dirt. And no matter what block you want to make, as long as you have the texture of one side of it, you can just do this very simple replacement. Okay, so this is a dirt block, and you may be thinking, oh, okay, I want this to be a dirt block, so we need to, pick this, set it to dirt, and do that a bunch of times. No, there's a faster way. So what we're going to do is select everything we want to be dirt. So this one, this one, this one. Just pick a good patch of them. So let's say we want all these to be dirt. We're going to make our last selection our original dirt block. And you're going to see that this one is kind of a brighter orange, which means it's the active object in our selection. So with that, we have our selection and our active object. Control L for make links, and we want to make links by material. And you can see this copied the material of the active object over to the rest of our selection. And this is very exciting, so exciting that I need to take some water. Okay, we're doing good. So let's see what else we want to be dirt. So let's say we want, a patch over here. This can be dirt. And maybe this tiny patch over here can be dirt. This is a bit different than our original, because the original, everything is stone up top. At least it looks like it. But in our version, we can have some of the top blocks be dirt. There's no issue there. So again, make your selection, shift-click something that is dirt to make it our active object, Control-L, and then Materials. And let's add one more or two more kinds of variation. So I like the idea of coal, because it would be very surface level in-game. You might find it, a couple levels down. I mean, you could add diamonds, but it's not very realistic to the game. So let's pick this one to be coal. And then we're going to click this button right here, which again is going to give us a new material, but keeps our node tree. So we can call this coal, and then just change our image texture over to coal ore. And you see, it's really that simple. And it seems like we got the rotation looking right. This is what I remember. I haven't played Minecraft in a couple years, admittedly, so my memory's not that fresh. So coal comes in kind of deposits, so we can pick a couple near it to be coal, and maybe one or two blocks over here, and then finally make this the active object, Control-L by materials. And just to repeat this process at speed, so without explaining too much, pick a tiny deposit, or actually let's go with one of them for now, create a new material, go away fly. Turn this into iron, for example, because I think that's the last texture I've extracted, iron ore, and then deposit with this as the active object, Control-L, materials. Okay, so I saved, and this is looking pretty chaotic, which is what I want. I want it to look kind of random. I don't like some of this dirt. For example, this I'd like to be stone, so select it, change this over to stone. And you could once you have all these materials in here, you can just swap them out very easily. Okay, so I like the look of that. Let's go back to the layout workspace and see this in 3D. We were already seeing it in 3D, but I want to see it in a big window in 3D. Okay, yeah, that's looking very good. And yeah, so once we put this in our footage, one thing that I should mention, I'm just going to go to the sample. You notice that this right here is a block, even though the top part of this, the top face, has the texture from the real footage. It's more obvious over here where we have some of the, it's not graffiti, it's painting, some of the parking spot indicator that is left over. So you see the top texture here is the footage, and then everything inside is Minecraft type textures. And that's just to say that we're not really done texturing here, since we want, the top face of this one, and this one, and this one, etc. to all be the footage, but we're going to take care of that later. So for now, if we're happy with this, save, select everything, and make sure that you don't want to modify anything anymore, so make sure you're happy with this. And then F3, join. And if you don't see join, which is an issue I ran into before when I was trying to rehearse for this tutorial, yes, I take time to rehearse. If you just select things without an active object, so here we have an active object, so this one shouldn't, you're not going to be able to find, oh, you do, shows what I know. Either way, if you don't see join, just make sure you have an active object. That solved it for me. So F3, join. And this is going to join it into a single mesh like this. So now our crater is easy to deal with, and we don't have, 1,000 cubes over here. So we can just rename this to crater. And this kind of bakes in our materials as is. We can still modify them. So right now, if we go into the material tab of this crater, you see it has 4 materials, the 4 that we used. And if we go into edit mode and select something like the coal and then click select, yes, it's going to show us the selection that has coal. So if, for example, we were to say, oh, we want this to be coal right here, we'd select this face and then assign. Whoops, I had stone selected, so with coal, assign, and you see it changes it that way. But this is much harder to work with than having them as individual cubes and then joining. And really what we're going to do is add a 5th material here. That's going to be our footage material, and we're just going to select, this top level over here is the main idea. But we have this as one mesh, so let's just object, set origin, origin to geometry. I always have to think that one through. So now our origin is where it's supposed to be, and we just want to center this, not in terms of height, because I like the height as it is now. If we go into the side view, you see it's directly under the floor, which is how a crater would be. But we can still center this in terms of X and Y. So N for our transform properties, or you can go into object, this object, what's it called? Yes, the object tab, and we have our location here. So center the X, center the Y. I'll do it here this time just to emphasize it works. And then we don't want to we don't want to center the Z, since if we did, it's going to be floating above the floor, which is not what we want. So I'm just going to save. Okay, I'm happy with this. So right now, I think this is where we're going to leave off the first tutorial. I'm trying to remember if there's anything else we want to do for this modeling, but we've gone over how to model and basically shade. There wasn't much modeling involved. And just so we can see what this looks like with some kind of shading, because right now this is looking very, I don't want to say flat shaded since that's what it's supposed to be, but it's looking very flat in terms of no shadows, no ambient occlusion. So in rendered mode, we can add in a light, Shift A, light. We'll add in an area light, bring that up. And we're going to change over to cycles. I'm going to use my GPU. And the reason we want cycles is because it's a ray tracer, path tracer. Point is, it's photorealistic in the sense that it's actually calculating light interactions. Again, if you're a beginner, don't worry about this. And in the light settings, we just want to make this so it's actually lighting the scene because this is very dark. So use nodes and bring our emission from 1 to something higher since we want it to be brighter. So we'll start off with 10. Okay, that's a start. Let's go to 100. There we go. And we can bring this up and also bring it a bit to the side so we get our shadows going in, one direction, maybe in the other direction. Kind of like that. And to make our shadows a bit softer, because in-game they're a bit softer, again, this is not the lighting we're going to use for the final product. We're going to try to match the lighting of the footage as if the sun is in the same spot as this light. So we can take our size and bring that up to 5, let's say. And this is going to make our light physically bigger. Again, 1, 5, so now it has a bigger area. And what this does is, I don't know if I should explain this, but generally the outcome is it's going to make our shadows softer. So focus on the shadow here. We'll go up to like 50. And now this is so soft that it actually grays everything out. And the reason is, once your light is very small, it's pretty much casting light rays in some sense from a single point, so the shadows are going to be very harsh. But if your light is bigger, it's going to cast from a lot of different points in that light, and it's going to fill out some of the areas that were in shadow if it were only a single spot. If that went over your head, don't worry about it. Doesn't matter. Okay, so we did the modeling, and then in the next tutorial, we're going to do motion tracking. That's going to be taking our footage and looking at how it moves so that we can, put our crater in there. So we're going to be dealing with our original footage, but since we have the model, we can just plop it in. Okay, so hopefully you guys now have a start with the crater, and we're going to continue next time. If you guys like these tutorials, we're at the end of a tutorial. I think I deserve some kind of, I make these, I get the choice. I'm choosing to pimp out Patreon. So if you want to donate to my Patreon, which is funding these tutorials, the audio quality you're hearing now wasn't always this way. I used to have a horrible, horrible microphone, but because of Patreon donations, better audio quality. So if you want to donate, if you think it's worth your money, and if you want to promote me making more tutorials, because that's effectively what it does, check out my Patreon. It's in the description. Bye, guys.